Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Salk Institute and to the 15th anniversary of Symphony at Salk and the 50th anniversary of the Institute. This has really been an extraordinary year of celebration for us, and I know that you are in store for a spectacular evening. Ms. Minnelli was doing her dress rehearsal in the courtyard a little while ago, and she stopped us all in our tracks. She's just still fabulous, and you are going to have a fantastic night. But I'm so pleased that you chose to spend a half an hour here learning a little bit more about the Institute. The Salk Institute is a magical place, world-renowned for stunning science, of which you saw a brief glimpse in the video, but also renowned as a place where art and science have a magical synergy that has been part of the life of the Institute for the past 50 years. As you know, this is a campus that is an iconic landscape designed by Kahn, and really a testimony to the brilliant science that takes place within its walls. In the next few moments, you're going to hear from two speakers, and I'm going to introduce them both to you now, and then when they have both finished their remarks, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and then, of course, to go upstairs, enjoy the reception, and the evening to follow. First to speak to you tonight is Scott Magic. Scott received his bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Oregon. He's worked for several San Diego architectural firms, and in 2009, he established his own firm, Scott Magic Architecture. He's an adjunct faculty member of the New School of Architecture, and we are very, very grateful because since 2007, Scott has been a regular architectural tour guide here at the Institute, and thousands of people have learned about the beauty of this place from him. Thank you, Scott. And then you are going to hear from one of Salk's senior scientist, Professor Greg Lemke, who has been at the Institute now for 24 years. Greg is world-renowned. He received his BS in Life Sciences from MIT, his PhD in Biology from Caltech, and he is renowned for many of the discoveries he has made in his lab, but probably most significant of them is that Greg has found a special family of molecules known as TAM receptors. The TAM receptors serve as a brake pedal for the immune system and prevent the system from mounting an out-of-control, destructive inflammatory response against invading pathogens. Professor Lemke has won more awards and honors than I can tell you about tonight. He is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, but most importantly, he is one of our own. He is an esteemed Salk senior professor, and we're very grateful to have his presence here tonight. Thank you, Greg. And so first, Scott, and then Greg, and then I hope you will have a fabulous time tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. It's a great honor to be here this evening and talk about Louis Kahn's masterpiece and the building upon which all of you will be in shortly. I decided to be an architect because I saw this building and it opened up the world of meaning to me. This building essentially is a temple to science, a temple to a great man, for all of us to inhabit and to discover more about our own lives. Louis Kahn was hired by Dr. Jonas Salk in 1959, only by accident. Originally, the two had met to discuss other architects upon which to hire to design his institute in La Jolla, California. After 4 hours of conversation, the two men became best friends for the rest of their lives, ultimately collaborating with each other to create one of the greatest buildings built in the 20th century. The Institute went through several years of redesign, ultimately inspired by many things, but primarily between the collaboration of Dr. Salk and Louis Kahn. Lou was a different kind of architect. In fact, he's one of the most important architects of the 20th century. He was a very unique individual who was inspired by classical and historical precedents. And he worked in a time when many buildings, the glass skyscrapers that dot our cities, when many architects looked forward into industrialization, he looked backwards. For to him, buildings were monuments to culture to civilizations, to people. And so many of his architectures and his buildings were inspired by those monuments of time, yet translated in a more modern sensibility. One of the greatest influence upon Louis Kahn was the great work of the Roman architects. This is the Pantheon in Rome, built out of a very similar concrete upon which the Salk Institute is built. But he not only looked at Roman architecture, he looked at everything for influence, this being the campus of Thomas Jefferson for the University of Virginia, a quad surrounded by key buildings connected through an arcade, and the lawn overlooking the valleys of Tennessee. The architect finally came up with this last scheme in 1962, upon which Dr. Salk built this portion. It took 6 years to build, and once it was completed, it became an international monument. Here's La Jolla in 1962 when they had begun the grading. Estancia was just not even an idea yet. UCSD was still Camp Matthews. And there was the Highway 101. During the 6 years, Dr. Salk and the architect came out to the site many times, laboring over this one material upon which you see everywhere tonight, the poured-in-place concrete. One thing to point out is that this was a marketing tool, for no institute had ever been built like this before. And if you're going to live in San Diego, and if you're going to have offices, well, every scientist better have the same view. So as the building grew taller and taller, the form took shape and the courtyard filled in. And this is the masterpiece upon which you'll be in this evening. The space of the immeasurable, as Dr. Salk used to call it. For this is where you're presented with nature. And man distinguishes itself from nature, for in the labs is where you do the measurable. Like two hands, there are two symmetrical buildings, and this is the fountain, which symbolizes the valley of life, where things connect and flow out towards the ocean. The offices were designed as philosophical realms, the oak desk and the carpet, as the architect used to say, where the scientists could get away from the lab and research and think and clear their minds. It's also one of the most amazing scientific tools that was ever designed. This is one of the labs. It's almost the size of an American football field, with no walls, no columns, nothing to inhabit use. For Dr. Salk had no idea where science was going to go, who was to come here, and how they would occupy these floors. And so the architect gave him a new tool, something that was completely flexible. And so they came up with the space and built an entire floor above it called the servant floor, where all the mechanical pipes and ducts and conduit would exist so that it wouldn't get in the way of the science and allow these labs to change and accommodate future technologies without being disrupted. It has since become the benchmark for all lab design and has yet to be replicated. Here's one of the original labs in the 1960s. But what's very exciting is that this is the 50th year of the Institute. And here's the sunset around the equinox. And I think it's very fitting that the artist Dale Chihuly picked up on that idea. This was Dale Chihuly's son. It took about a week to install earlier this year in April. His art pieces juxtapose the architecture, not through similarities, but through dissimilarities, the sort of organic nature and chaotic curls of his artwork versus this sort of static architecture. And the two have this great, great relationship. And tonight, I hope you enjoy the symphony as well as Greg Lemke's speech. And thank you very much.